The morning on 442B started like any other morning. The sun rose over the colonial settlement with its orange glow, casting long shadows across the streets. Children played in the central square. Workers moved between the agricultural domes and the manufacturing plants. Governor Hayes stood in her office, reviewing reports about the quarterly harvest. Everything was normal, everything was safe. That changed in seconds. The first alarm came from the orbital defense station. A loud warning sound filled the air, first in the military compound, then spreading across the entire settlement. Looked up from her desk as her assistant ran into the office with panic in his eyes. "Governor, we have incoming ships. Many of them," said, his voice shaking. "The defense station reports multiple large vessels entering the atmosphere." Stood immediately. Her hands moved on the communication panel, connecting to Colonel Gregory Lane, the military commander. Gregory's voice came back hard and fast. "I see them. We are tracking 17 ships in formation. They are dropping fast and moving toward the settlement. Their weapons are active." Felt something cold move through her body. Classification: unknown species. They are not responding to hails. Their ships match no database we have. Made her decision in less than a second. Sound the shelter alarm. All civilians to the bunkers now. The shelter alarm was different from the emergency alarm. This one meant the worst. This one meant death was coming. Across the settlement, people heard the sound and understood. Mothers grabbed their children. Fathers stopped their work and ran. Elders moved as fast as they could toward the bunker entrances. The settlement had been preparing for this moment for years, running drills every month. But drills were not real. Real was different. Real was terrifying. Colonel Gregory Lane stood in the command center, watching the screens. The approaching ships were like nothing in the human database. They were gray and sharp, with weapons systems that looked biological rather than mechanical. Their design was aggressive. Everything about them screamed violence. "Get me the defense grid status," Gregory commanded. A young officer responded, "Defense towers are at 50% capacity, Colonel. We were upgrading the East Sector batteries. The West Sector is fully operational." Gregory nodded. It was not ideal, but they would work with what they had. He had trained these people for this. They were ready. The ships descended lower, then they opened fire. The first volley of energy weapons struck the settlement's outer defenses. 3 defense towers exploded in bright flashes of light. The ground shook. Dust and smoke rose into the air. The attacking ships were not large vessels meant for cargo or trade. They were warships designed for one purpose: destruction. "Return fire," Gregory said calmly. The human defense towers fired back. Missiles launched into the sky. One of the attacking ships took a hit on its rear section and tilted slightly, but the others kept coming. They were not afraid. They did not hesitate. They simply continued their attack with precision and purpose. In the bunker, children cried. Adults tried to keep them calm, but fear was spreading like fire through the corridors underground. Worked to move people deeper, away from the upper sections. She could hear the explosions above, feel them in the walls. The bunker shook with each impact. Governor Hayes moved through the crowds of scared people. She spoke to them. "Listen to me. You are in the safest place on this colony. These bunkers are designed for this. Stay calm, stay together." An older woman grabbed his arm. "Who are they? What do they want?" Did not have an answer, so she did not lie. "I do not know, but we will survive this." Above ground, the battle continued. Human missiles took down 2 more enemy ships. Explosions lit the sky. But the remaining ships kept firing. They were targeting the main structures, the power generators, the communication arrays. This was not a random attack. This was coordinated and planned. Colonel Lane's voice came through the bunker communication system. "Governor, we cannot hold them much longer. Their weapons are cutting through our defenses faster than we can respond." Closed her eyes for one moment. She opened them again. What are our options? Very few. They are landing troops. We can perhaps hold them at the settlement's perimeter for a limited time. After that, they will breach the bunker systems. I estimate we have maybe 70 hours before they reach the lowest levels. 70 hours, less than 3 days. Made another command. Colonel, send out the old emergency beacon. Every frequency, every band. Use the old transmitter in storage. Governor, that beacon is decades old. The signal might not even reach Earth before degrading. The probability of anyone hearing it. I do not care about the probability, said. Send it. Send the message that we are here, we are under attack, and we need help. Send it to Earth and to every human colony we know about. Send it now. The emergency beacon was activated. It was an old device, built when the colony was first established as a backup in case of disaster. Nobody had expected to actually use it. But now, with the settlement burning and enemy troops descending from the sky, it was their only hope. The message went out into the darkness of space. This is 442B colony. We are under heavy attack by an unknown military force. Our defenses are failing. We have civilians, including children and elderly, sheltering in underground bunkers. If anyone receives this message, if anyone is listening, we need immediate military assistance. This is not a drill. This is a real attack. We are trapped. We are dying. If anyone can hear this, we need help. Earth, are you listening? The message repeated over and over, sending outward into space at the speed of light. Around the settlement, the sounds of war continued. Explosions, weapons fire, the cries of soldiers and civilians. The colony of 442B, which had lived in peace for 30 years, was now burning. In the bunker, Hayes held the communication device. She looked at the faces of the people around her. Children, families, the people she had sworn to protect. She whispered a prayer to whatever force might be listening in the vast darkness of space. Then she waited for help that might never come. The command center on Luna Station received thousands of messages every day. Most were routine, trade reports, scientific data, personnel transfers, routine information that flowed through the channels of the United Earth Defense Command like blood through a body. Admiral Torres sat in her office reviewing fleet deployment reports when the signal came through. It was different from other signals. It was old and degraded by its long journey through space, but the content made her blood stop. "Get me the origin verification," she commanded. A technician worked quickly. "Admiral, this is as originating from 442B colony. The transmission timestamp shows it left the origin point approximately 140 days ago. The signal has been degraded by radiation in deep space, but the identification markers are genuine." Read the message again. "Attack unknown force, civilians, 70 hours until bunker breach." The message was old, 140 days old, but did not think about the time delay. She thought about the fact that there was a colony under attack and it needed help now. She activated the command alert. Within minutes, the War Council was assembled in the secure conference room. This included Admiral Torres, General from the Army, Commander David from the Navy, Doctor from the Science Division, and Secretary of Defense Harrison. "Show them," said. The message played, the words filled the room. When it ended, there was silence. Then Secretary Harrison spoke first. "That colony is 3 months away by standard travel. There is no way we can get conventional forces there in time. The people are already dead, Admiral. We have to accept that." Did not accept it. She was not built to accept it. "There is one way," she said. "The experimental gates. The FTL transport technology we completed testing on last month." The room erupted. General shook his head. "The gates have never been used with human personnel. The theory is solid, but we have no actual proof they work on living tissue. We could be sending soldiers to their deaths. Or we could be saving an entire colony," countered. "The gates can transport strike teams across vast distances in minutes instead of months. If we launch today, we can have trained soldiers in orbit around 442b within hours." Commander leaned forward. "The power requirements are extreme. We would need to shut down civilian stations temporarily. The psychological impact of testing experimental technology with human lives is less than the impact of abandoning our people," said firmly. "Who are we if we do not help when we can? I am not asking anyone to do this. I am deciding to do this. I need volunteers." Secretary Harrison raised his hand. "Admiral, this requires government approval. We cannot just activate experimental military technology." The colony sent a distress signal. Under the charter that founded our presence in space, any Earth settlement under attack has the right to call for defense. That is not a question or a debate. That is law. The question is only whether we use standard methods or experimental methods. Standard methods will fail. Experimental methods might work. She looked at each council member. "I am activating the gate transport protocol. I am calling for volunteer strike force personnel. I am taking responsibility for this decision. Anybody who wants to object can do so in writing, but we are moving now." General studied her face for a long moment, then he nodded. "I will have soldiers ready. How many teams?" 3 teams. Each team has 12 combat personnel. That is enough for a proper strike operation. Within the hour, the message went out through the military ranks. Volunteers were needed for an emergency operation. The terms were simple. The mission was unconfirmed, the technology was experimental, and survival was not guaranteed. The response shocked no one who knew soldiers. Hundreds of people volunteered. 3 team leaders were selected based on experience and tactical skill. Captain Price was a veteran of the border conflicts with excellent tactical instinct. Captain Rachel Morgan had commanded successful operations in hostile environments and was known for protecting her people. Captain David Lee was an expert in rapid assault operations and did not know the meaning of failure. These 3 captains and their teams were briefed on the mission. In 6 hours, they would step into the experimental transport gates. They would travel through space in a way that technology had never achieved before. They would arrive at 442b, and they would fight to save people they had never met. Captain Price sat in the briefing room with his team of 11 soldiers. He was a man of 40 years, with gray starting to show in his hair. He had a family back on Earth. He had 2 children and a wife who worked as a doctor. He had a life that was safe and good. He had also taken an oath to protect human settlements in space. "Listen up," he said to his team. "The colony has no more than 70 hours before the enemy forces breach the bunkers. We arrive in orbit in approximately 3 hours. We do not know the full scope of the enemy force. We do not know the exact condition of the colony's defenses. We only know that people are dying and we are going to stop it." A young soldier named raised his hand. "Captain, what are the survival odds?" Did not lie to his people. "Unknown. The gates themselves might kill us. If they do not, we are walking into an active war zone against an enemy we know nothing about. But I will tell you this. If we do not go, that colony dies. That includes at least 300 children and 500 elderly. If we go, we might save them. That is why we go." In a different briefing room, Captain Rachel Morgan spoke to her team. "We are the extraction and protection element. Once the assault teams secure the perimeter, we move in and get those civilians out of the bunkers. We do this fast and clean. We do not leave anyone behind." Her team nodded. They were professionals. They understood what was being asked. Captain David Lee had only one thing to say to his team. "We are going to break their command structure. They are expecting to have 3 days. They will not have 3 hours. Let us move." The final preparations continued through the night. Equipment was checked. Weapons were loaded. Medical supplies were prepared. The soldiers called their families, said goodbye without saying they might not come back, because that was how soldiers did things. At the gate chamber, the three teams assembled. Each soldier carried weapons and supplies designed for rapid operation. Around them, technicians made final checks. The gates hummed with power. The experimental technology was ready. Admiral Torres came to observe the launch personally. She stood and watched the soldiers prepare. She thought about all of them. She thought about the colony. She thought about what humanity meant. Captain Price was the first to step forward. He looked back one last time at Earth. Then he walked into the gate. The light flashed. He was gone. One by one, the soldiers stepped through the gates. 11 more from Price's team. 12 from Morgan's team. 12 from Lee's team. In total, 37 soldiers walked into technology that had never been tested on humans before, traveling across space in a way that broke every law of physics that had ever been understood. When the last soldier disappeared into the light, the gates powered down. The chamber fell silent. Admiral Torres turned to her staff. "Have the gates recharged immediately. If this works, we might need to send more people. If it does not work, we will at least know that we tried." She walked out of the chamber and back to her office. Then she waited to hear if her soldiers had survived the journey or if they had been lost in the void of space. The light faded. Captain Price's eyes adjusted to darkness, then to the sight of stars. His team materialized in orbit above 442b, exactly where the gates had been programmed to send them. The technology had worked. The soldiers were alive. Below them, the colony burned. Smoke rose from a dozen locations. The settlement's infrastructure was visibly damaged. Enemy ships moved in coordinated patterns, maintaining fire on ground positions. The view was both a relief and a horror. They had arrived, but they had arrived to a war zone. "All teams, report status," Price said into the communication channel. Captain Rachel Morgan's voice came back. "Team Bravo is here, all personnel accounted for, ready to deploy." Captain David Lee responded. "Team Charlie is operational, standing by for orders." Price assessed the situation. The enemy had complete air superiority. There were no human aircraft defending the colony anymore. The only way to change this was to strike first. "All teams initiating combat protocol. Lee, you are assault. Take out the enemy command structure and their primary weapon systems. Morgan, you are protection and extraction. Stage in holding position until the perimeter is secured. I am going air superiority. Move now." The three teams split their forces. Lee's assault team targeted the enemy ground command position, an area where communications equipment and leadership gathering had been detected. Morgan's team moved into position above the bunker complex, ready to descend the moment ground conditions allowed. Price's team engaged the enemy aerial defense systems. The first human missiles launched at the enemy ships. They had not expected this. They had assumed the colony had no reinforcements. They had assumed they had complete dominance. They had been wrong. One enemy fighter exploded in a burst of light. Then another. Price's team was good. They were very good. They flew with the kind of coordination that came from months of training and years of experience. Every move was calculated. Every shot counted. But they were not weak. They were enhanced warriors with advanced weapons. They adapted to the human assault faster than expected. One of Price's fighters took heavy damage from return fire and had to break formation. The pilot, Lieutenant Stephen Cross, pulled his damaged craft away from the main battle. "I am taking fire from the north sector," Stephen reported. His voice was steady despite the danger. "I am going to draw them away from the formation. Continue with primary objectives." "Negative, Cross," Price said. "Get back here." Stephen did not get back. Instead, he dove toward a cluster of enemy fighters that were threatening the formation's flank. He fired on them, drawing their attention. The maneuver was reckless. The maneuver was brave. The maneuver was fatal. Stephen's fighter exploded under coordinated enemy fire. But in that moment, The enemy fighters that had been targeting the formation were now out of position. Price's team exploited the gap and destroyed them. Stephen Cross was the first human to die in the fight to save 442B Colony. On the ground, Captain David Lee's assault team descended into chaos. The landing zone was hot. Enemy fire came from multiple directions, but Lee's people were trained for this. They moved like water, finding cover, returning fire with precision, advancing methodically toward their objective. The enemy troops were called, though the humans did not know this yet. They were tall, creatures that seemed partly organic and partly machine. They were fast and strong. They were designed for warfare, but they had never encountered humans fighting with the kind of desperate determination that came from protecting their own kind. Lee's team leader, Sergeant Michael Park, took a burst of enemy fire in the shoulder. He did not stop. He returned fire, dropped to a knee, and kept fighting. "Keep moving," Lee commanded. "We are 3 minutes from the command center." The team pushed forward. One of Lee's soldiers, Corporal James, threw a charge at an enemy position. The explosion was violent and effective. The enemy position was neutralized. They reached the enemy command center. It was a makeshift structure, hastily erected when they took the settlement. Inside, commanders were still coordinating the assault on the bunkers. They were not expecting a direct assault on their position. Lee's team breached the structure hard and fast. Gunfire erupted inside. It was close quarters. It was brutal. But when it was over, the enemy command center was destroyed. The commanders were dead. The coordinated assault on the bunkers stopped suddenly. Without command guidance, the troops lost their coherent strategy. They began falling back, reassessing, trying to reorganize. This was the moment Captain Rachel Morgan's team had been waiting for. "All Bravo personnel drop now," she commanded. 12 soldiers descended toward the bunker complex. Morgan's priority was not combat. Her priority was getting people out alive. She landed near the main bunker entrance where the civilians were sheltering. Inside the bunker, Governor Hayes was monitoring the battle above through the communication system. She heard the gunfire. She heard the explosions. Then, suddenly, she heard a new voice. "This is Captain Rachel Morgan, Human Military Strike Force. I have soldiers at the main entrance. You need to start moving civilians out now. We have a window of opportunity, but it will not last long." Could not believe what she was hearing. She looked at who was standing nearby. "Get the evacuation teams moving," she said. "Everyone goes up now." The bunker doors opened. Children emerged first, scared but moving. Adults helped the elderly up the steep stairs. The evacuation that seemed impossible minutes earlier was now happening because soldiers had arrived from Earth to make it possible. Captain Morgan stood at the entrance with her team, weapons ready, protecting the evacuees as they came out. Behind her, the soldiers engaged any enemy forces that approached the bunker area. One of Morgan's soldiers, Specialist Tors, saw an enemy fighter closing in on the evacuation position. Without thinking beyond the immediate threat, she threw a device that disabled the fighter's systems. The enemy craft crashed harmlessly to the side. "Keep them moving," Morgan said to her team. "Faster." More and more civilians emerged from the bunker. Children clung to parents. Elderly people moved as fast as they could. The soldiers helped them, sometimes carrying them when they were too weak or injured. Above, in the skis, Captain Price's team was winning the aerial battle. Enemy ships were retreating, damaged and losing fighters faster than they could replace them. Price pushed the advantage, pushing the enemy further away from the colony. They had expected an easy victory. They had expected to break the bunkers and slaughter the colonists. They had not expected humans who were willing to sacrifice themselves to prevent that outcome. The forces began a full retreat, the soldiers attacking the bunker positions toward their landing zones. The ships in the sky formed up and began moving away from the colony. It was not a decisive victory yet, but it was a turning point. Captain Lee regrouped his assault team and linked up with Morgan's extraction force. The evacuation was still happening. Hundreds of civilians were now out of the bunkers. The wounded were being treated by Morgan's medical personnel. The children were being moved to a secure staging area. Governor Hayes emerged from the bunker herself and found Captain Rachel Morgan was covered in dust and sweat. Her face showed the strain of the last hours. "Are you real?" asked. Rachel smiled. "Yes, Governor, we are real, and we are not leaving until everyone is safe." The human soldiers formed a perimeter around the civilians and the evacuation zone. The retreat continued. The battle was turning in humanity's favor, but it was far from over. Captain Price watched the enemy ships move away from the colony in his flight display. He did not chase them. Instead, he maintained control of the airspace and established what peace could be achieved in the midst of war. 3 strike teams from Earth, 37 soldiers. They had come through experimental gates across space itself. They had arrived in the middle of an active military situation, and they had changed the course of the battle. Stephen Cross was dead. Michael Park was wounded. Tors had thrown herself in front of danger without hesitation. But around them, people were being saved. Families that would have died were now being evacuated. A colony that had seemed lost was now being saved. The fight was not over, but humanity had arrived. They were falling back now, but they were not broken. They had lost the element of surprise. They had lost control of the air. They had lost their command structure. But they still had numbers, they still had weapons, and they still had the capability to kill. Captain David Lee organized the defense perimeter with Colonel Gregory Lane, the colony's military commander. Gregory had been coordinating ground defense from the colony's backup command center, directing what remained of the colony's militia. When the human strike forces arrived, he immediately understood the situation. "They will consolidate and hit us again," Gregory told Lee, pointing to the positions where enemy forces were regrouping. "They are professional soldiers, enhanced warriors. They will learn from the first assault and adapt." Lee nodded. "Then we do the same. How many of your people can fight?" "About 80 militia personnel and 70 trained colonists who have militia training. Not as good as your soldiers, but they know how to use weapons." "Then we integrate them into the defensive structure," Lee said. "Every position gets at least one of my people to lead. Your colonists provide numbers. My soldiers provide direction." The work of organizing the defense continued through what passed for night on 442B. The sun had set hours earlier, leaving the colony under the light of emergency lights and the occasional flash of continuing distant combat. The human soldiers worked alongside colonial militia, setting up defensive positions, establishing fields of fire, preparing ammunition and medical supplies. Captain Rachel Morgan established a medical center in what had been the colony's agricultural processing center. Her medical personnel worked through the night, treating wounded soldiers and colonists. Some injuries were minor. Some were critical. Morgan worked without rest, moving between patients, directing her medical team. One patient was Sergeant Michael Park from the assault team. He had been shot in the shoulder. The wound was serious but not fatal. Morgan's medic, Specialist Daniel Hunt, had cleaned and bandaged it. "Will I be able to fight?" Michael asked. "Not in the next 12 hours, Daniel said. "After that, maybe. Depends on how well you heal and how determined you are." Michael was very determined. Governor Hayes met with Captain Lee in the makeshift command center. The colony's original government building had been damaged by weapons fire, so they worked from a bunker system that was not as comfortable or well-equipped as they would have liked. "We have 2,143 civilians evacuated," reported. "Another 312 are still coming from the lower bunker levels. 71 are confirmed dead or missing." Lee listened without interrupting, When finished, he responded, "The enemy will hit us again in approximately 4 to 6 hours. They are regrouping about 2 kilometers north of the settlement. We have the terrain advantage and interior lines. We can hold them." "For how long?" asked. "Unknown. It depends on their assault capability and our ability to sustain casualties. But we will hold them until morning and possibly longer. Then we can see if reinforcements are coming from Earth." Knew that reinforcements would not arrive anytime soon. The gates could not be used repeatedly without massive power requirements. These 37 soldiers were what they had, but they were enough. They were proving to be enough. The attack came at 0400 when soldiers were most tired and the darkness was deepest. They hit the defensive perimeter hard from multiple directions. This time they were more careful, more coordinated. They had learned from the first assault. But the humans had also learned. Captain Lee's soldiers held the center and the strong points. Colonial militia filled the gaps. The assault waves broke against the defensive line. Casualties mounted on both sides. Human soldiers and colonial militia died. So did many warriors. But the line held. Captain Price's remaining fighters flew low support missions, using precision fire to break up enemy assaults that threatened to break through. Every missile and every burst of weapons fire was calculated to cause maximum disruption with minimal friendly fire risk. Morgan's medical teams worked at double speed, treating the wounded as fast as they could. Some soldiers went back to fighting positions. Some could not. The wounded piled up in the medical center, some stable, some critical, some dying despite the best efforts of the medical staff. One of Lee's soldiers, Corporal James, had taken a blast of enemy fire in the legs. He was not going back to the line, but he was alive. Daniel Hunt was treating him, trying to stop the bleeding, trying to save the legs. "How bad?" James asked. "Not good," Daniel said, "but survivable. You are going to live, soldier." The sun rose over 442B as the assault ended. The attack had lasted 2 hours. When it was over, the human defensive line was still intact. They had lost more soldiers than they could afford to lose. Colonel Gregory Lane looked at the battlefield. Dead soldiers lay scattered across the colony territory. Dead humans and colonists lay in the medical tents. The cost of victory was high. Captain Lee found Governor Hayes as the sun came up. Looked like she had not slept. She had not. She had been in the shelters with the civilians, watching the battle through monitors, hearing the sounds of fighting above. "We held," Lee said simply. "How long can we hold?" asked. "As long as we have to. The enemy is losing soldiers faster than we are. Eventually they will break." But Lee did not know if that was true. He was saying what needed to be said. They were still superior in some ways. The human advantage was training, coordination, and the willingness to die protecting others. Those things were powerful, but they were not infinite. As the morning went on, messages came from Earth. Admiral Torres had received reports of the successful landing and the initial combat. She sent a message to Captain Lee. "You are authorized to use maximum force to defend the colony and the civilian population. Additional reinforcements are being prepared. Hold your position." But Lee knew that no additional reinforcements were coming. The gates had been experimental. Using them again would require days of preparation and power management. The colony had to hold with the soldiers they had. Captain Rachel Morgan made her decision in the early afternoon. She went to Captain Lee. "I need to talk to you about the civilians," she said. "What about them?" "They are becoming a liability. I mean that in a tactical sense. With 3,000 civilians in restricted areas, our defensive options are limited. We can move them further into the bunker system, deeper where there is more safety." Lee understood. It was a good tactical suggestion, but Hayes had to make that decision. "Talk to the governor," Lee said. Morgan found in the medical center, checking on wounded people. When Morgan explained the tactical situation, agreed. Move them, said. Get them as deep as possible. If this perimeter breaks, at least they will have time. The evacuation of civilians deeper into the bunker system took hours. It was organized and coordinated. By early evening, most of the civilian population was in the deepest levels of the bunker complex, farther from the fighting. As darkness fell on the second day of the battle, they made no new assault. They were regrouping. They were assessing. They were realizing that this colony was not going to be as easy to conquer as they had expected. Captain Lee assembled his commanders. Captain Price came from the flight operations area. Captain Morgan came from the medical center. Colonel Gregory Lane joined them. Enemy assault capability is degrading, Lee reported. They have not attacked since morning. They are down to maybe 40% of their original combat strength. We are down to 70% of ours. So we have more staying power, Morgan said. Yes, if they attack again and we stop them, they will be broken. They will have to retreat or surrender. Gregory looked at the maps. They will attack again. They came here to conquer this colony. They do not surrender easily. Then we defeat them again, Price said. And if we do not, Morgan asked. Nobody answered that question. The attack came at midnight. This time, it was different. They were desperate. They committed everything they had left, driving hard at the center of the human defensive line, trying to achieve a breakthrough before they lost all capability. For 3 hours, the battle raged. Human soldiers and colonial militia died. Warriors died. The medical center became overwhelmed with casualties. Daniel Hunt had to make choices about who could be saved and who could not. But at the end of those 3 hours, the attack broke. The enemy soldiers that survived were retreating. The ones that did not survive lay on the ground. Captain Lee watched the retreat and understood what it meant. They are broken, he said to Gregory. They are pulling back to their ships. Will they leave? Gregory asked. They will leave. They have lost too many soldiers. They cannot achieve their objective anymore. They will return to their command and report failure. Captain Lee composed a message to be sent to them. It was simple and direct. You are defeated. You have lost combat capability. Withdraw your forces and we will allow you to leave. Do not withdraw and we will destroy you completely. You have 1 hour to decide. The message went out over military frequencies. They did not attack again. Instead, after 45 minutes, their remaining ships began to power up. The ships that had been based on the ground started lifting off. The soldiers on the ground began pulling back to extraction points. They were leaving 442B. The colony was saved. The last enemy ship disappeared into space as the sun rose over 442B for the 3rd time since the attack began. Silence fell over the colony. It was a strange silence, one that came after days of constant noise and violence. Captain Price stood on the damaged landing field and watched the enemy ships leave the gravity well of the planet. They were not pursuing. There was no need. The battle was over. The count began immediately. The casualty count, the supply count, the infrastructure damage count, everything had to be assessed. 37 human soldiers had arrived. 4 were dead. Another 8 were wounded severely enough that they could not continue fighting. The rest were combat effective, though exhausted and running low on ammunition. 153 colonists had died in the attack or during the evacuation. Another 78 had been wounded. The colony had lost 30% of its structures. The agricultural systems had been damaged. The power generators were operating at reduced capacity. But the colony had not been conquered. The people were alive. Governor Hayes walked through the settlement with Captain Lee, surveying the damage. The streets showed signs of battle, destroyed equipment, blast marks on buildings. The scars of violence were everywhere. "What do we do now?" asked. "Now you rebuild," Lee said. My people will help you stabilize the situation, but this is your colony. You own its future. Captain Rachel Morgan was in the medical center, which had been transformed from a processing facility into a hospital. The wounded lay on beds or on the ground, being treated by her medical personnel and by colonial doctors who had joined the effort. Specialist Daniel Hunt was treating a colonial physician named Dr. West. Daniel was cleaning her arm wound, which had been sustained when she was helping in the shelters. "You are a brave woman," Daniel said. "I am a doctor," replied. "Helping people is what I do." Daniel understood. These colonists were not soldiers, but they had fought like soldiers to protect their community. Captain Price made a detailed report to Admiral Torres on Luna. The message would take weeks to travel across space, but Price wanted to make sure the report was accurate. "We have successfully repulsed the attack. The colony has been saved. Civilian casualties are significant, but the population has survived. Enemy forces have retreated. We have established defensive positions and will maintain security until colony infrastructure is restored. Recommend sending support supplies and additional personnel for reconstruction efforts. The people of 442B are resilient and determined. With assistance, they will recover." The message was encrypted and transmitted into space. Governor called a meeting with her advisors and the human military leaders. It was held in a secure bunker, away from the public, where plans could be made about the colony's future. "We need to prepare for the possibility that the enemy returns," said. "We need to upgrade our defenses. We need to train more of our people to fight." Captain Lee nodded. "I recommend establishing a military academy on the colony. We will leave behind technical expertise and training programs. You can build a professional military force over time." Colonel Gregory Lane spoke. "The problem is that training takes years. We need experienced soldiers now." "Then we bring some from Earth," Price suggested. "Not many, maybe 50 or 100, enough to serve as a core group of officers and instructors." Rachel Morgan had another suggestion. "We also need to improve the colony's infrastructure, better shelters, better early warning systems, better communication with Earth and other colonies. If we ever face another attack, we need to be able to call for help faster." Made notes of all the suggestions. When the meeting ended, she understood that the colony's future would be different from its past. It would be stronger. It would be more prepared. It would be a colony that learned from the attack and adapted to face future threats. The reconstruction began immediately. Human soldiers and colonists worked side by side. They cleared rubble. They repaired structures. They restored power systems. The work was hard and took weeks, but slowly the colony began to look less like a war zone and more like a place where people could live. Captain Rachel Morgan established the military academy in a new facility that was built from recovered materials. Her first class of students included both colonists and soldiers who would stay behind to help with the defense. Captain David Lee trained the new soldiers in tactics and weapon systems. He was hard but fair. He pushed them to excel. By the end of the first month, the new colonial military force was beginning to take shape. Captain Price worked with the technical teams to upgrade the colony's air defenses and communication systems. He also supervised the training of the colonial pilot program. By the time Price was ready to return to Earth, a dozen colonists had been trained in basic fighter operation. The three captains prepared to return home. The experimental gates had been recharged at great cost, and Admiral Torres had authorized their use for the return journey. On the day they left, Governor Hayes held a ceremony in the colony's central square. The entire colony was gathered. Behind the people, the rebuilt settlement stood as evidence of human resilience. Spoke to her people and to the human military. 3 weeks ago we were trapped. We were dying. We had sent a message into space and did not know if anyone would hear it, but someone did. Our people on Earth heard our cry. They sent soldiers across a distance that should have been impossible to cross. They arrived and fought with courage and skill. They showed us that humanity stretches across the stars. That distance does not matter, that we are not alone. She paused and looked at the three captains. These soldiers will return home now, but they carry with them the gratitude of everyone on 442B. More than that, they carry the knowledge that they made a difference, that their sacrifice and their courage saved lives. That is the legacy of humanity. That is what defines us. The crowd gave a standing ovation. The soldiers stood quietly, uncomfortable with the attention. This was not why they fought. They fought because their people needed them. That was enough. Captain Lee, Morgan, and Price stood together one final time before stepping into the gates. "Good luck to all of you," Lee said to the colonists and his remaining soldiers who would stay behind. "Take care of this colony, make it stronger. And take care of each other," Morgan added. "That is what humans do, we take care of our own." Price simply nodded. He did not need words. They stepped into the experimental gates. There was a flash of light, and they were gone, traveling back across space to Earth. Admiral Torres received the returning soldiers on Luna. There was a formal recognition ceremony, but the soldiers were more interested in returning to their families, telling them they were alive, holding them again. Captain Price returned to his family. His wife cried when she saw him. His children threw themselves at him. He held them and said nothing about the battle or the danger. He just held them. The news of the successful defense of 442B traveled throughout the known human colonies and into the Galactic Communications Network. The message was clear. Humanity would defend its people. Humanity would fight against any force that threatened their kind. Distance was not a barrier. Technology was not a barrier. Nothing could stop humans from protecting their own. The alien species in the Galactic Commerce Authority learned this lesson quickly. The who had seemed invincible had been defeated by human soldiers. The image of humanity changed across the galaxy. They were no longer seen as secondary species to be dominated. They were seen as dangerous allies that could not be conquered. Governor Hayes sent a message to Admiral Torres, which was transmitted back across space to Earth. "The reconstruction is proceeding well. The colony is stronger than before. We have established new defensive systems and have begun training a colonial military force. We have also begun manufacturing additional weapons and defensive equipment. More importantly, we have learned that we are not alone. We know that Earth will answer if we call. That knowledge has given us hope and has made us determined to build a colony that can stand against any threat. Thank you for sending your soldiers. Thank you for not forgetting us among the stars." In her office on Luna, Admiral Torres received this message. She saved it. She would show it to others. It was a reminder of why the military existed, not for conquest, not for domination, but for protection. For the defense of human life wherever it existed across the vast darkness of space. The colony of 442B grew stronger over the following years. New settlements were established nearby, each one more prepared for defense, each one knowing that help could come from Earth if needed. The message that Governor Hayes sent out that first day had traveled across space and changed everything. It had reached Earth. It had been heard. And because it had been heard, people lived who might have died. Families stayed together. Children grew up who might never have been born. That was the power of humanity. That was the strength that no enemy could overcome. The willingness to hear a cry for help and answer it, no matter how far the distance, no matter how impossible the task seemed. The human settlements across the stars had learned that they were never truly alone. Earth remembered them. Earth would come for them. That made all the difference.